Okay, so for this video, I'm going to be talking about values and priorities, which is very, very important because when you are aligned with your values and you prioritize your life in a way where it aligns with your values, it is much more clear on determining on who's your person and who's not your person. Because the person that's meant for you, the one that you want, the spouse that you're looking for, has the same core values that actually matter in marriage. And that's what you'll be looking for. And you will not be able to see that if you're not living those values yourself. So, values is a tricky thing to understand because people misunderstand what values are. And to kind of summarize what values are, it's more of like it's the fundamental characteristics or like identity beliefs about like who you are that drives your decisions, that drives the way you think and feel. And if these values are not in place, you are going to be all over the place and you're going to be looking for the wrong things and you're going to be looking based off of whatever my ego wants, and it's not necessarily what you're looking for. It's not necessarily the things that matter in a marriage long term. And so to start off, I just want to explain what values are, and I'll give a couple examples. But what I want you to do in this video, I want you to look up the list. It's called the James Clear Core Value List, and you want to look that up. It's just an example of a list of core values. And I'm looking at it right now. I just pulled it up, and there's going to be a whole list of values, and you want to see what are the top 5 values that lights you up. That's like, yes, this is me. Like this is what I want in me, like in who you want to be. Okay, so as an example, I'm going to read a couple of them. There's authenticity, adventure, autonomy, balance, beauty, boldness, compassion, challenge, community, competency, creativity, curiosity, fun, growth, honesty, humor, influence, knowledge, leadership, love, loyalty, openness, optimism, pleasure, peace, religion, faith, security, trustworthiness, wealth, wisdom. Okay, so I just listed a couple of them. Now, I'm going to show you how this kind of shows up in terms of the search process, but I'm someone who I will share mine, okay? So my values, and I have it kind of written up here, but it's faith, growth and learning, openness and acceptance, um, fun and well-being is another one. And well, let me see, serving with my skills, right? Serving is another core value of mine. So the way it shows up is, and one of my core values is when I said is compassion and understanding and openness. If that's one of my core values, I want to look for someone who also has that core value, who's like open and understanding. And how does that show up? It means when I'm talking to a potential, if I'm living the value of openness and authenticity and understanding and compassion, that means when I'm talking to someone, I talk to them from a place of openness and understanding and curiosity and like um authenticity, right? So I'm kind of put all of those together, but those are kind of my core values. And when I'm operating from that place and I'm being authentic, when I'm being myself and I'm speaking up and I'm not sugarcoating things, I'm not sugarcoating his or I'm not people pleasing, the person I meet, I talk to, if they like that, they will stay, they will be attracted to that. And if it's not a core value of them and they don't like someone who's honest and authentic, they will run away. They will not be your person. So, yes. So it is so, so important to when you say you're aligned with your values, it's not just for funsies. Like you're doing it because for your sake to live a very fulfilling life, the way you fill your cup is actually being aligned with your values. If you say I'm someone who's aligned with my faith, but you kind of barely pray, you don't really prioritize your deen that much, you're also gonna when you talk to someone who doesn't prioritize their deen, you'll be like, "Oh yeah, I don't do that either, so who cares?" And then you start looking for things just to be like your ego is going to start looking for things just to be compatible on instead of like being compatible on things that actually matter. Okay, so this one's kind of this is more a complicated thing to explain, so I'm going to try to simplify it as much as I can. But as an example, for when it comes to marriage, what I'm looking for in a marriage is I want at least these values to be met. I want someone who prioritizes faith, who is compassionate and understanding, and authentic and honest. Those are the values that I'm really, really like prioritizing. And so when I'm talking to someone who doesn't like those values, they will not show up as that. They will try to like either manipulate or not be open or try to like do sneaky things, and I'm gonna not find that attractive because I'm like, that's not what I'm looking for. So then you don't even because you're living your authentic self, because you're living your values, that is one of the best screening tools that you can use to see if someone's your person or not. Now, a side note on this does not mean that they have to act exactly the way you act. Okay, values is very different than priorities. Priorities is how you live that value. So, as an example, if I say my value is faith, the way I li personally live that value is I pray my prayers on time, I pray my sunnahs, I go to halaqas, I study the deen, pray tahajjud, whatever, right? That's the way I live it. The way someone else lives their faith is, let's say they pray their five fara'id, but let's say they serve the community and that's their way of doing it for the sake of Allah. Like that's their way of serving. That's their language in terms of faith. We live very different. We don't have the same way it's prioritized. It's not the same, like it doesn't show up differently, but we have the same core value, which is faith. We do things for faith. So that's a match, right? As long we're just looking for when they're doing something, what's the value underneath it? Okay, so that's for example for faith. Um, Another one is, and also that doesn't have to be on the same exact level either. It doesn't have to be like if I'm someone, let's say, who studies a lot more or like really takes their deen seriously, and someone is more like, they pray their fara'id, they do all the fard things, um, but they're very like open and compassionate and everything. The value is still there, right? They still value the deen, and it's a priority for them. And it doesn't have to be like the exact same level either. It can just be, it shows up differently for people. So let's say the next thing is growth or learning, right? So for as an example, I'm very, very into self-development. I obsessively like read books. I do a lot of things because it's part of my job too, but like just I'm really into that. The person that I'm looking for, who's my current husband, he also values growth, but in a very different way. In a very different like his growth is more focused in a way where it's like it's not the way I would grow. It's not like I'm into self-development in books, but he grows in like he challenges himself and like ambitiously in his work or like in other ways, though that's his way of growing. It's not necessarily like doing the self-development work, it's different. It shows up differently, but he's still at the core of who he is, he values growth. He wants to grow, he's ambitious. Okay, another one is what was the third thing? Another value of mine is having fun, like being fun. So it's in kind of in my personality. So I want to also look for someone who has the value of fun. And what that looks like is do they take the time to do fun things in their life? Okay, so that's another thing. So someone who is living that value and they're living that life, you can clearly see if their life matches up with yours. And again, it's not perfectly matching up. It's more of like, do they have those values? And it doesn't have to be shown exactly the way you do it. It could be shown up differently. But what actually matters in marriage is like the characteristics of the values. So, for example, if I'm saying I'm authentic and I'm honest and I'm open, when I'm talking to a potential, the way to see if I'm living my own value is when I'm talking to someone, am I open and honest and compassionate with them, or am I sitting there judging them and getting the ick every time they do something? Or when I'm talking to someone and I am being authentic in myself and they don't like that and they run away, how do I manage that? That's another way to see, am I living the value of growth or am I just kind of like, you know, It's just am I not living it either? So again, this is not all done perfectly. Obviously, no one's perfect at it, but it's more of, are you operating from values and like having a fulfilling life where you're actually doing what you say you are, or are you not? Because if you're someone who's not living their values and you spend all day kind of wasting your time, doom scrolling on your phone or whatever, which we all fall into every now and then. But if your life feels boring and you don't like it and it's just like so unfulfilling, your mind is going to try to look for a spouse to fill in that void. Your mind is going to try to subconsciously look for things that actually don't matter to like satisfy your ego instead of satisfying your values. So you start focusing on things that are like, you start nitpicking on things that don't really matter. Because you're just like, you're kind of feeling like not enough in your life. And so you're kind of looking for someone else to fill that not enoughness when you're not living from your values. But if someone who's living from their values, they're a lot more fulfilled and satisfied and flexible with how things show up. And so they're more open to love because they're not coming from ego. They're coming from, I have an amazing fulfilled life. I do this, 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 and I feel happy. I feel genuinely like, maybe happy is not the word, but I feel fulfilled. I feel like I'm doing what I say I am, and I'm proud of who I'm being for now. Like I'm working towards it, and I'm looking for someone who can support me in that journey. And support me doesn't mean also like exactly the same and like kind of coaching you through it, but more of like with me at the same time. So we're just kind of joining together. And so what does this mean in terms of like practically speaking? How does this show up? Because people can get caught up in this one too. If we think about what matters in marriage, which many Muslims don't understand what matters in marriage because they don't have the relationship experience to understand what matters in a relationship. But what matters is when you are in a relationship, how do you want to be treated? How do you want to be, um, how does life go when you make life decisions? How do you argue? Um, how do you come back from arguments? How do you make decisions? How do you face conflict together? All of that, what's the values that matter in that moment? Okay, so for me, when I think about that, I'm like, I want someone who is very understanding, who is very caring, who is very who who takes the time to, who takes responsibility for their actions, who who's more open and understanding. So, what do I do when I have this list of core values? I ask myself, am I living that? Am I understanding and compassionate and open and understanding with the other person as I'm talking to them? Okay, if I am, good, check. Now, this is the list, this is the checklist that you're going to be looking as you're on your search for your person. You are looking for someone who is understanding, compassionate, caring, curious, open, prioritizes faith, prioritize all the things. And this is how you'll find like this is okay, yep, this is my husband or this is my wife because you're focused on values, not necessarily the way it shows up. Because, side note, um, the way things shows up is not necessarily the way you think it would show up. Because Allah gives you what you need, not necessarily exactly what you want, like the way imagining it perfectly the way you want. So, as an example, I was coaching a client not too long ago. It's been a while, but alhamdulillah, she's engaged now. But there's a couple of them actually, but there's one that's coming to mind where she thought that what she needed on her checklist is someone who has a degree because we were writing out her must-haves, and one of them was like he has to have a degree. And eventually there came along a man who doesn't have a degree, but he checks off everything else. And the degree that he doesn't have, what he does have instead is he's an entrepreneur, and he's a brilliant entrepreneur who makes a lot of money. And her mind got stuck in thinking like, wait, I thought he has to have a degree and he doesn't have it. So I think this is a deal breaker. And I said, no, no, no. We're looking at the value. We're not looking at how this shows up because a degree is not a value. What's actually underneath what she's looking for is when we say education or a degree, we say we want someone who's like smart. We want someone who's like ambitious, let's say. and educated in whatever way, right? So when someone chooses not to uh, go for a degree, we want to ask, okay, so how is he doing that? How is he living that value instead? Okay, he's choosing the entrepreneurship route and he's really successful at his business. That means he's really smart because it's very hard to run a business. And so clearly he's living the values he says he has. And then so we talked it through and she's like, okay, yep, that sounds right. And then they got engaged. So alhamdulillah, it worked out. But we tend to dismiss these things, right? We think, oh, he doesn't have a degree, that means he's not my person. But if we're not, we don't take a second to just like get curious and understand what's the core value underneath that I'm missing, that I'm not seeing, or if he has or he doesn't have it, that's a different story. But when you're looking on values. You're not looking at like how it shows up. So another example is, let's say I want someone who works out at the gym. They're very insistent on that. They have to work out at the gym. And so it was a guy that I was coaching, and so I asked, okay, but what if let's say you meet a girl and like everything's great, but she doesn't work out at the gym. And he thought, well, no, that doesn't work because how else is she taking care of herself? And I said, well, let's say she doesn't like to work out at the gym, but she eats, she takes care of her body and she makes sure like she doesn't go overweight, and she takes her hot girl walks every now and then, and she does her thing, but she takes care of herself. And so what we identified is he's not necessarily focused on like she has to go to the gym. He wants someone that prioritizes the way, like her well-being and the way she looks, and that she doesn't just let go of herself. But he thought like the only way to get that is if she goes to the gym all the time. But that's not necessarily true because, the gym's not for everyone, and people can, take care of themselves in very different ways, and it shows up for everyone differently for everyone. And so once we kind of worked on that, overcame that, alhamdulillah, that man is now he's getting married now soon. So alhamdulillah, that also worked out. So we have to uncover what you actually care about and how it shows up underneath the decisions they're making. Because we're not familiar with how things like what each thing represents, the value underneath, we just dismiss the whole thing. Especially something like education, like a degree. As immigrant parents kind of like really emphasize like you should, really prioritize your education and degree, and like that's what creates your value. And so when someone doesn't have a degree, your brain, that part of your brain gets activated, and you want to intentionally decide, wait, no, hold on. The reason I care about degree is because I want them to be smart, not necessarily for the degree, because who cares for the degree? We care more about, can he actually make money? Is he actually smart? Okay. So, um, trying to think. Okay, right. So I think I've said enough with that. Um, in terms of priorities, what does it mean to prioritize things? You want to look at your current life and ask yourself, am I actually living the values, or is most of my day spent on things that I don't actually care about? And you want to focus on shifting that. So if you're someone who you look at your life and you're like, oh my God, my life is so boring, and all I do is just scroll all day and I just distract myself and nothing feels fulfilling, then the first step is just to identify what your core values are and make decisions based off of that. How can you fill your life based off of the values you say you have? So if you want your values to be faith, just as an example, faith, growth, fun, authenticity, adventure. Do you fill your life with adventures? Do you fill your life with, do you have authentic communication? Do you show up authentically? Or do you people please most of the time? Because someone who people pleases, and if you're looking for a spouse who's authentic and being real, that's not going to match because he's going to catch on to your people pleasing. Or if you want someone who's confident and your value is confidence, what does that actually mean to you? Does confidence means, being able to handle whatever comes your way? Is it resilience? Is it what is it? So then you have to identify that. And when you show up that way, the other person's going to see that and be like, oh, I like that too. I want that. And then you have a match. And so in the next video, I'm going to talk about want matches and how that shows up. But with this video, you have to really take the time to write out your core values. Try to maximize it to like, or do like a minimum of 5. And the person that you're looking for, they don't have to have the same exact thing. Like I said, they just have to have like the ones that actually matter. So faith, understanding, like how you relate to each other, right? How do you actually talk and communicate together? That's what matters. So characteristics like compassion, openness, understanding. I know I've repeated this before, but those are what matters. That's what matters. Okay, so if someone tells me I want someone who's like 6 foot, and I'm like, okay, what value is this? And they're like, the value of attractiveness. And I'm like, but attractiveness does not equal to 6 foot. Okay. Like we have to really unprogram whatever we think is important to what actually matters, because these are the values is what will create attraction and a long, fulfilling marriage, inshallah. So that's for values and priorities. And you want to list out, once you've listed out all your core values, you want to list out by each one how you're going to live that throughout your day. So if you have a perfectly beautiful day that's aligned with your values, um, how does that show up for you? When you say you value adventure and faith and all this, how does your schedule look like throughout the week? And the goal is to create a fulfilling life, that you like you're living your values and you're focusing on that. And naturally, when you're more aligned with values, your spouse will see that and they'll be like, "Oh, we're a match. Let's go." You don't even have to, there's no effort, there's no putting in work. You're just putting in effort in your own self. You're putting in effort into aligning your values, and actually like feeling happy with yourself, happy with your life, and being proud of like, yep, this is my values, this is who I am. And you show up very differently. And when you show up differently, you're a lot more attractive to yourself. You feel more confident because you're not telling yourself that you're not enough and whatever because you're too busy living your values. You don't have time for that. You don't have time to sit around and second guess yourself. You're making decisions based off of how you want your life to look like, and you go after it. And for more on values and priorities, I would recommend, I mean, let's see, I've tried to explain it enough here, but if you want more explanations, I think if you just Google or YouTube, uh, no, actually, if you just chat GPT, like help me find my values, I think chat GPT will be really good at that too. Or just do more research on values and priorities, but your goal is to really find that. And once you do, you're ready for the next thing. And I would not recommend anyone going out there and looking for a spouse until they find this, until they like get really solid with this list. And because this helps them kind of make better decisions. Okay. So inshallah that helps, and I will see you in the next video, inshallah.